Have you ever noticed how often we're told that strength means acting fast, fighting harder, or never backing down? Whether it's politics, social media, even our personal relationships, we're encouraged to believe that decisive action is always the courageous choice. But what if real bravery sometimes looks like restraint, perseverance, and the patience to let wisdom catch up with our emotions? I'm Brandon Jubar, and this is Mythologizing the Bible, where we'll be taking a look at 3 readings from the Christian Bible through the lens of sacred myth. As we reflect on the readings for the 16th Sunday in Ordinary Time, we'll explore a richer understanding of resolution, being resolute, one that values self-control over aggression, resilience over certainty, and thoughtful patience over impulsive reaction. In this episode, we're asking a challenging question. Where am I trying to uproot a weed instead of growing through it? So grab a comfy seat, a glass of your favorite beverage, and let's look at some ancient stories together in this edition of Mythologizing the Bible, where we'll be exploring the readings for the 16th Sunday in Ordinary Time, Cycle A of the Roman Catholic Lectionary. So our first reading is from the Book of Wisdom. It's chapter 12, verses 13 and 16 through 19. Our second reading is from Paul's letter to the Romans. It's chapter 8, verses 26 and 27. And our gospel reading is from Matthew. It's chapter 13, verses 24 through 30. Now we'll start by going through all 3 of the readings. Then we'll look for the messages and the main lesson in each one. Finally, we'll bring everything together, look at what it means for us today, and talk about where we go from here. And with that, let's begin. Our first reading is from the Book of Wisdom. For neither is there any God besides you, whose care is for all people, to whom you should prove that you have not judged unjustly. For your strength is the source of righteousness, and your sovereignty over all causes you to spare all. For you show your strength when people doubt the completeness of your power, and you rebuke any insolence among those who know it. Although you are sovereign in strength, you judge with mildness, and with great forbearance you govern us, for you have power to act whenever you choose. Through such works you have taught your people that the righteous must be kind, and you have filled your children with good hope, because you give repentance for sins. Our second reading is from Paul's letter to the Romans. Brothers and sisters, likewise, the Spirit helps us in our weakness, for we do not know how to pray as we ought, but that very Spirit intercedes with sighs too deep for words. And God, who searches the heart, knows that it is the mind of the Spirit, because the Spirit intercedes for the saints according to the will of God. And our gospel reading is from Matthew. Jesus put before them another parable. The kingdom of heaven may be compared to someone who sowed good seed in his field, but while everybody was asleep, an enemy came and sowed weeds among the wheat, and then went away. So when the plants came up and bore grain, then the weeds appeared as well. And the slaves of the householder came and said to him, Master, did you not sow good seed in your field? Where then did these weeds come from? He answered, An enemy has done this. The slaves said to him, Then do you want us to go and gather them? But he replied, No, for in gathering the weeds you would uproot the wheats along with them. Let both of them grow together until the harvest, and at harvest time I will tell the reapers, Collect the weeds first and bind them in bundles to be burned, but gather the wheat into my barn. All right, so let's go back and take a critical look at these readings and see what learnings and lessons we can find if we dig around just a little bit. Our first reading was from the Book of Wisdom. And When we think of bravery, we often picture someone who charges into a fight or just refuses to back down. But this passage offers a different vision of strength. It suggests that true power is expressed through justice and patience and mercy rather than intimidation or force. Whether we read these qualities as divine or just simply deeply human, the lesson is still pretty timeless. Most of us will have moments when we hold the advantage in an argument or a disagreement or we have a position of authority. In those moments, it's tempting to prove that we're right or to make someone else lose. But real resolution asks a harder question. How can I solve this problem without causing unnecessary harm? Choosing restraint is not weakness. It takes far more courage to stay calm than it does to lash out. It takes far more courage to listen instead of escalating or to seek a fair solution instead of just an easy victory. That's the kind of strength that builds trust, it preserves relationships, and it helps create a more lasting peace. Resolution, being resolute, is measured not by the power we possess, but by the wisdom and the restraint with which we use that power. So the main lesson I got from our first reading is that resolution chooses restraint. The challenges we face don't always require us to be louder, tougher, or more aggressive. Sometimes the bravest response is the one that's guided by patience, fairness, and a hell of a lot of self-control. Resolution, being resolute, chooses restraint. Okay, our second reading was from Paul's letter to the Romans. And this passage speaks about moments when words fail us, times when life feels uncertain, overwhelming, life just feels too heavy to explain. Whether we understand that experience in spiritual or purely human terms, it's something that almost every one of us has faced and will likely face again. We've all had times in our lives when we weren't sure what to do next. It's easy to believe that brave people always feel confident. Well, in reality, courage often looks a lot quieter than that. It means taking the next step even when you're anxious. It can be asking for help when you need it. It can be trusting that clarity will come through your continued effort rather than just waiting around for perfect certainty. One of the greatest sources of resilience is remembering that we don't have to carry every burden alone. We find strength by reflecting on our values, leaning on trusted friends and family, and drawing on the wisdom and the support of the communities around us. Demonstrating resolve isn't about pretending to be fearless. It's about refusing to let uncertainty keep us from moving forward. Resolution, being resolute, is the courage to keep moving forward even when we don't have all the answers. So the main lesson I got from our second reading is that resolution endures uncertainty. Life rarely gives us complete certainty before asking us to take action. The challenge isn't to eliminate every doubt. The challenge is to keep growing through it with honesty, resilience, and hope. Resolution endures uncertainty. Okay, our final reading was from the Gospel of Matthew. And at first glance, this parable might seem a bit frustrating. Why not just pull up the weeds as soon as they appear? But the story reminds us that life is rarely that simple. Problems are often tangled together with things that we value, and acting too quickly can damage the very people or relationships that we're trying to protect. Now, whether or not Jesus intended the allegorical explanation that appears to have been added later in Matthew's gospel, this parable itself stands on its own as a nice lesson in thoughtful decision making. It invites us to resist the temptation to see every challenge in these black and white terms. And sometimes the wisest response is to just observe carefully, to gather more information, and then wait until we can act without causing greater harm. That kind of patience takes courage. It takes resolve. We live in a culture that rewards immediate reactions and demands instant solutions, but resolution isn't about acting first, it's about acting well. Some problems require decisive action, while others require the discipline to let understanding grow before making a difficult choice. Resolution includes the wisdom to resist quick fixes when patience leads to better outcomes. So the main lesson I got from our gospel reading is that resolution embraces complexity. Not every challenge should be solved as quickly as possible. Sometimes the bravest path is to accept that life is complicated and then remain patient and respond with wisdom when the time is right. Resolution embraces complexity. All right, let's review the lessons we've talked about so far. In our first reading from the book of Wisdom, the main lesson I came away with was resolution chooses restraint. In our second reading from Romans, the main lesson I got was resolution endures uncertainty. And finally, the main lesson I got from our gospel reading was resolution embraces complexity. These three readings remind us that courage comes in many forms. Sometimes it means holding our power in check instead of using it against someone else. Sometimes courage means taking the next step when we're tired or uncertain or struggling to find the right words. And sometimes it means resisting the temptation to try to force a quick solution, trusting that patience and more careful judgment will produce a better outcome. That's what resolution really looks like. It's not about charging headlong into every battle or pretending to have all the answers. It's the steady determination to act with wisdom, to preserve through uncertainty, and to face life's complexities without losing sight of what truly matters. When we cultivate that kind of resolve, we don't just overcome challenges. We become the kind of people others can depend on when challenges inevitably arise. So let's step back and take another look at these readings overall and see if we can figure out what these lessons really mean to us in our daily lives. To do this, I'll try to answer two questions. So what and now what? Okay, so what? Why should we care about any of this? Well, we should care about the importance of being resolute because our culture often mistakes strength for domination. Right? We see it in politics, on social media, sometimes even in our own relationships. Winning becomes more important than understanding. And kindness is dismissed as some sort of a weakness. But real courage isn't measured by how effectively we overpower others. It's measured by how wisely we use whatever power we have. Choosing restraint when we could retaliate. That's one of the strongest things a person can do. This is important because resolution also gives us permission to admit that we don't have all the answers. Too many leaders, too many organizations, too many ordinary people feel pressured to project absolute certainty. But pretending to be fearless or infallible doesn't solve problems. In fact, it usually makes them worse. Just look at our president, for example. When we're honest about our struggles and willing to ask for help, we create the trust and cooperation that are needed to face these difficult challenges together. We should care because resolution reminds us that not every problem has an immediate solution. Today's culture often demands that we identify the bad people, remove them, and assume everything else will fall into place. Real life is rarely that simple. Families, workplaces, communities, they're complicated, and making hasty decisions can do lasting damage. Sometimes the bravest choice is to slow down, to be more resolute, so that you can learn more and respond with wisdom instead of with impulse. That's why this week's value matters. Resolution, being resolute, isn't about always having the right answer or always acting first. It's about having the courage to use power wisely, to face uncertainty honestly, and to navigate complexity with patience rather than fear. And the last question I try to answer is, now what? What are we supposed to do? Well, this week's readings remind us that resolution isn't about reacting faster. It's about responding wiser. The next time you face a difficult person, a frustrating situation, or an uncomfortable truth, pause for just a moment and ask yourself this question. Where am I trying to uproot a weed instead of growing through it? Now that question invites us to slow down before we act. Sometimes the weed is another person, but just as often that weed is our own impatience or fear, our need to be right. When I was the Deputy Director of Customer Advocacy at the U.S. Department of Labor, one of my employees immediately tested my patience. I'd worked around him in a previous role, and I'd already formed a pretty negative opinion. I just thought he lacked initiative. He struggled with the work and just wasn't capable of performing at the level I expected. So when I became his supervisor, my first instinct was to deal with the situation quickly and decisively. Fortunately, I caught myself before doing anything I'd regret. I realized I was about to pull what I thought was a weed without really understanding what I was looking at. Now, instead, I made a conscious decision to slow down. I spent more time talking with him, learning about his strengths and weaknesses, and trying to understand what was really going on instead of just relying on my own past assumptions. Now, that wasn't the easy path at all. It took a couple of years, plenty of frustration, and even a formal grievance filed against me before things finally began to make sense. But over time, I discovered that he wasn't completely incapable. He was simply a poor fit for the work he'd been doing. And once I identified a role that better matched his abilities, well, he was able to contribute much more effectively to the organization. Now, there's one final twist in the story. Just as we reached that point, he decided to retire. Now, you might hear that and think that means all the effort I spent was wasted. I don't see it that way. The real lesson wasn't about changing him. It was about changing me. If I'd acted on my first impulse, I would have confirmed my own assumptions instead of challenging those assumptions. Choosing patience didn't produce the outcome I originally expected, but it made me a better leader. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do isn't pulling the weeds. It's taking the time to learn what we're really looking at before we act. So here's our question again. Where am I trying to uproot a weed instead of growing through it? When we stop trying to control everything around us and start focusing on how we respond, we develop the kind of steady courage that resolution requires. we become less reactive, more thoughtful, better equipped to handle life's inevitable challenges without making them worse. Before we wrap up, I'd like to leave you with a thought from the ancient Chinese philosopher Lao Tzu. What is soft and yielding overcomes what is hard and strong. Now, at first, that sounds backwards. What is soft and yielding overcomes what is hard and strong? We tend to think strength means pushing harder, standing firmer, or winning the fight. But life often teaches the opposite. The people who adapt, who remain calm under pressure, people who refuse to be driven by anger, usually accomplish far more than those who rely on force alone. Now, that idea fits perfectly with this week's challenge. Before you rush to pull up a weed in your own life, ask whether patience, understanding, or quiet persistence might produce a better outcome. Being resolute isn't always loud or dramatic. More often, it's the steady courage to bend without breaking, to endure without giving up, and to respond with wisdom instead of impulse. What is soft and yielding overcomes what is hard and strong. That's the kind of strength that lasts. All right, we've come to the end of this episode. Thanks for joining me. I'll be back again next week. But in the meantime, I encourage you to engage with our question for the week. Where am I trying to uproot a weed instead of growing through it? Staying resolute, being brave in the face of challenges, can help you remain steady until the time is right to pull those weeds. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Mythologizing the Bible as we did a deeper dive into the readings for the 16th Sunday in Ordinary Time, Cycle A of the Roman Catholic Lectionary. Remember that resolution is the steady determination to act with wisdom, persevere through uncertainty, and face life's complexities without losing sight of what truly matters. The Bible readings used in this episode were from the New Revised Standard Version Updated Edition, copyright 2021 National Council of Churches of Christ in the United States of America, used by permission, all rights reserved worldwide. Thank you for listening. If you like this content, please consider telling a friend about it. The more people who hear the positive messages I'm sharing, the better. Mythologizing the Bible is a live-streamed series held most Thursdays at 8 p.m. Eastern Time on twitch.tv/thecodaproject. Mythologizing the Bible is part of the overall values-based approach to life that I focus on at thecodaproject.com. I also publish the Weekly Compass, other blog posts about living a life that's aligned with your core values, and I share ways that you can become politically active from the comfort of your own home. To learn more, to subscribe to my mailing list, and to keep up on everything I'm doing with the Coda Project, please visit thecodaproject.com.